We're looking live at Washington right now, and this week, another consequential one in U.S. politics. Donald Trump now has only 9 days left in that White House, but he's now facing impeachment for a second time. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says Democrats will move this week to impeach him over the attack on Congress by a pro-Trump mob.
Universally accepted that what happened was a terrible, terrible violation of the Capitol, of the first branch of government, the legislative branch, by the President of the United States.
Nancy Pelosi, obviously very emotional in that 60 Minutes piece last night. Now, she says Democrats will go ahead with impeachment proceedings against Trump unless Mike Pence moves to force him out in the next 24 hours. Pence has not said so publicly, but U.S. media outlets report he's refusing to invoke the U.S. Constitution's 25th Amendment to strip Trump of his presidential powers. Democrats could vote on a resolution that puts pressure on Pence as early as today, and articles of impeachment against Trump could be voted on by the end of the week. So, Maya King joins us again this morning, a politics reporter at Politico. She is in Washington to help us look ahead to this consequential week. Maya, thank you for joining our program once again.
Thanks for having me.
This is Monday of the last full week of the Trump presidency, so all eyes on the White House and on Capitol Hill today as it begins, Congress and the House specifically making its moves as of today. What will you be watching for notably today, Maya?
Well, I'll be really looking for how Congress and how Democrats act in their pressure campaign against this White House. It's very clear in the footage that you showed that Speaker Pelosi, as well as those members of her inner circle, Majority Whip Jim Clyburn and others, are very prepared to send articles of impeachment, or at least to make that move this week. And they'd, I think, like to see Vice President Pence and other members of President Trump's cabinet start to invoke the 25th Amendment, or at least make some kind of a public gesture that suggests that they do more than just verbally condemn what happened last Wednesday. And so whether that takes the form of a formal resolution or introducing the articles of impeachment today, which is also a possibility, these are all things I'll be looking for. But essentially what's at the core of this is Democrats don't want another day to pass without there being some kind of concrete action to essentially recognize, but also bring forth consequences to this president for what happened in his role with the insurrection last Wednesday.
Watching some of the Sunday shows yesterday, Maya, it was interesting to hear Republicans who are now starting to denounce Donald Trump, but for many of them, they still believe the best way of all of this is for Trump to resign. Is there any indication that that is in the offing or likely at all?
I mean, one thing, one of my colleagues put this really well. The reason why he's being impeached a second time, or why that's being considered, is also the reason why President Trump won't resign. This is a very unlikely scenario, and that's why I think everyone is counting on those in his inner circle to push him out. But we know that this is a president who is very prideful. This is a president who really has yet to recognize his role in this really awful domestic terror attack that did take place. And this is a president who is hoping at least to save face and leave office with some level of dignity and some level of recognizability. And for that reason, I think it's very unlikely that we'll see a resignation, though it is significant that a growing number of Republicans, of course, have gone forth to say this is wrong. And what he did, he really did play a role in last Wednesday's events.
Which you described as awful. And I just want to bring in some video of that because it seems to me with each new video we get and each new perspective on what happened on Wednesday, what actually did transpire becomes a passing moment. And what was narrowly avoided here is just chilling that this, potentially, as many have said, could have been a mass casualty event. From the benefit of now, a few days out, what are you thinking about what exactly happened there in the halls of the Capitol building?
Well, a number of things. I think most immediately, the reaction from law enforcement is something that I and a number of other reporters have really been thinking about and talking about and reporting on. Last summer in the United States, we saw some of the largest demonstrations against police brutality and systemic racism that were met with a very direct and very aggressive police response. For example, in one single day in the District of Columbia, more than 200 protesters were arrested for protesting against the very things that, we're now kind of seeing take place in the Capitol, or that did take place last Wednesday. And it's a stark contrast from the law enforcement reaction here. I mean, the footage that you're showing shows one single officer to try to defend the Capitol against a crowd of many dozens, if not hundreds, of insurrectionists in the Capitol. And so that's one thing that, we're really considering here is just there's a reckoning that has to take place. And of course, a number of investigations will happen over the next few months. But the big question in everyone's minds is, how did this get to be so bad? And where was the preparation to protect not only the reporters and the staffers in the Capitol, but also the government officials and those in the line of presidential succession?
Despite number of threats that have come to the public fore, seen online very, very clearly. And you're right, the investigations will follow those with interest as they try to find out exactly and identify the people who were there in some of that video, and also investigate for murder the people behind the death of the Capitol police officer who passed away. Mentioning, though, a little bit of social media, I'd appreciate your take on another angle to all of this. There's been a lot happening in social media in and around Donald Trump. Of course, at the end of last week, the word that his accounts, Twitter and others, were being permanently banned. And then we got word just at midnight last night, Maya, that Amazon, Apple, and Google have cut off Parler, booted it from that platform. That was an app that Trump supporters had been using. And then also the Wall Street Journal reported initially, and other American media outlets have confirmed, that Stripe, which is, again, it allows payment. So it is no longer going to accept payment for any money for Donald Trump's campaign after what happened on the Capitol. How much of an impact might that and those kinds of things have?
Well, social media companies really have been what's been keeping a number of these movements alive and have given birth to a lot of these far-right movements. It's how folks from different states have been able to keep in touch with each other. Ahead of last Wednesday's events, there were screenshots from groups in Parler that showed a number of people who then became insurrectionists, who ended up coming to the Capitol, coordinating where they were going to meet up, how they were going to bring weapons across state lines, and even which legislators they wanted to target and those who they really felt were enemies of their cause. And so looking at companies like Parler and others, I think that the calculus from social media companies is they don't want to play a role at all in the further stoking of tensions, in the further growth of these movements, and have tried to sort of cut them off at the source. And of course, I think the largest example of that we see now is with President Trump's Twitter account also being suspended. That was a move that a number of folks, particularly on the left, had been calling for years, saying that this president's Twitter account was, aggressive and was causing a lot of issues and really a national security threat. And I think now a number of social media companies recognize that, and again are saying that should any further action be taken here, they would not want to play a role in any further, disintegration of our republic, or of folks who would be coordinating further attacks.
Okay. Maya, I have to let you go, but just a quick question, because with all of that closing in, we haven't heard from Donald Trump since his Twitter account was banned, haven't seen him. Any indication that he will make any public comments, or there will be anything from him today at all?
I haven't seen the president's schedule for the day. We haven't heard any news or anything that would advise the press that he would have any public events today. But the First Lady has put forth a statement as of early this morning that is condemning in part the events of last Wednesday. So I think over this week we may see more public recognition from the president.
Thank you, Maya. As always, Maya King, who is a politics reporter at Politico in Washington this morning.